After a flight of more than 1,000 miles, the Nez Perce came within 40 miles of the Canadian border before their path ended at the foot of the Bear Paw Mountains. In 1877, the Battle of Bear Paw closed a desperate bid for freedom, an event marked by fierce resolve, heartbreaking choices, and lasting controversy. Watch to trace the true route, meet leaders like Chief Joseph through their words, and separate the myths from the recorded decisions and maps that shaped the outcome. You will learn how strategy, weather, and sheer human endurance collided in those final days, and why this story still matters to the present. If you enjoy carefully told history with respect and clarity, consider subscribing for more. Hook, forced removal, long retreat, winter hardship, final battle, surrender, historical impact, legacy. When the U.S. government sought to confine the Nez Perce to a much smaller reservation, a substantial portion of the people rejected the new terms and refused to be relocated. Leaders and families faced a stark choice between surrendering ancestral lands and attempting to preserve autonomy. That refusal set in motion a sequence of clashes and negotiations that would soon escalate into a desperate bid for survival. Forced removal was enforced through military pressure and legal decisions that labeled some bands as non-treaty and thus ineligible to remain on traditional territory. Many Nez Perce who had lived in a wide swath of the Pacific Northwest suddenly found themselves classified as trespassers on land their ancestors had used for generations. Resistance was not monolithic. Some leaders negotiated, others planned flight, and families split over the path forward. The long retreat across rugged country became a remarkable feat of endurance and tactical skill, as Nez Perce warriors conducted skillful delaying actions while thousands of non-combatants moved with them. They traversed mountains, rivers, and plains, evading capture at times and engaging in sharp fights when necessary, all while aiming for the safety of Canada. Supplies ran thin and the strain of constant movement wore on everybody. Winter hardship compounded the physical and mental toll, bringing cold, hunger, and disease that disproportionately affected the elders, children, and the wounded. Blankets and horses were lost, and the need to forage or trade became urgent in places where game was scarce. Morale fluctuated, hope alternated with despair, and the landscape itself became an adversary. The final battle at Bear Paw began as a tense standoff on territory close to the international border, where U.S. forces had managed to intercept the column and form a containment. A siege followed that tested the endurance of those still holding out and reduced options to little more than negotiation or capitulation. Food shortages and fatigue left the Nez Perce with critically limited choices. Surrender was ultimately carried out under terms that reflected exhaustion more than defeat in arms, and it was articulated by leaders who sought to spare further suffering. One leader famously declared, "First we'll fight no more forever," words that echoed widely and captured the profound weariness of a people who had tried to preserve their way of life. After that moment, many were taken to distant places far from their homelands, a displacement that left deep scars. The historical impact of the flight and the fight reverberated through public opinion, military policy, and legal treatment of indigenous peoples, highlighting the failure of treaties and the human cost of forced expansion. Sympathy and outrage arose in different quarters, but policy continued to prioritize settlement and control, often at the expense of indigenous sovereignty. The episode also influenced how the nation understood resistance and accommodation in its frontier conflicts. Legacy remains alive in memory, law, and landscape, where stories, songs, and sites preserve the experience of the Nez Perce. Sites associated with the retreat and the Bear Paw battlefield are preserved and interpreted, and the Nez Perce tribe continues cultural revitalization and advocacy for recognition and rights. Chief Joseph and other leaders endure as symbols of principled resistance and the complex consequences of a contested frontier. As we close this chapter on the Battle of Bear Paw and the flight of the Nez Perce, remember the core truths. A determined people sought refuge and safety, led by courageous leaders like Chief Joseph. They carried out a months-long retreat across vast, unforgiving lands. They fought bravely and ultimately surrendered with a plea that still resonates today. Promises were broken, lives were uprooted, but cultural resilience endured. This history is not distant. Your attention keeps these stories alive. If this account moved you, consider subscribing for more respectful explorations of Indigenous history. Share the video with others who should know, and leave your thoughts or questions below so we can continue the conversation together. Coming next, we will look more closely at Chief Joseph's life after Bear Paw and other overlooked stories of Native American resilience and resistance, bringing deeper context and the voices too often left out of the textbooks. Thank you for watching and for honoring this memory with me.